You open a website, you send a message, you watch a video. Almost instantly, something invisible begins to move. Data leaves your device, passes through routers, servers, cables, cities, countries, and sometimes oceans. You do not see the path. You do not hear the machines working. You simply tap, click, or scroll, and the world answers. So it feels natural to ask a simple question: who invented the internet? But the question is harder than it sounds. The internet was not invented like the light bulb or the airplane. There was no single genius, no dramatic moment, no person walking into a room and creating the whole thing. To understand why, we have to return to a time when computers were powerful, expensive, and almost completely alone. Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. Before the internet, computers were islands. In the 1950s and early 1960s, computers were nothing like the devices we use today. They were enormous machines, often filling rooms and costing so much that only universities, research labs, companies, or government agencies could afford them. They could calculate, store information, and process data, but they were not naturally built to connect. A computer in one place could not easily send a file to another computer across the country. It could not load a web page or pass information through the air like a phone does now. Each machine was almost like an island. If researchers wanted to move information, they usually had to move something physical: punch cards, magnetic tapes, printed reports, or stacks of paper. Data did not simply travel. People carried it, so computing was fast and slow at the same time. The machines could calculate quickly, but the world around them was manual, separated, and full of waiting. That is the quiet irony. Before the internet existed, even the most advanced computers on Earth were powerful, but lonely. Once computers became more important, one question became impossible to ignore. What if these machines could share information without people carrying it by hand? The Cold War problem. During the Cold War, communication became more than a matter of convenience. For the United States, it also became a question of resilience. Many communication systems were centralized. Messages often depended on important hubs, switching centers, or fixed routes. That worked when everything was intact, but it created a weakness. If one key point was damaged, a whole system could fail with it. So researchers began thinking about networks differently. Instead of forcing information through one central path, data could move across many possible routes. If one part stopped working, the message might still find another way. The network would not be like a chain, where one broken link ruins everything. It would be more like a web. But the internet was not simply invented to survive nuclear war. That explanation is too small. The Cold War shaped the thinking, but the larger goal was practical: a flexible way for computers and researchers to share information without depending on one fragile center. The idea was powerful. For a while, it was still mostly an idea. Then came the first real attempt to make computers talk. ARPANET and the first broken message. In the late 1960s, that attempt took shape through a project called ARPANET. ARPANET was funded by ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the United States government. Its goal was not to create the modern internet overnight. It was smaller and more experimental. The idea was to connect computers at research institutions and universities so people in different places could share computing power, data, and information. Then, in 1969, one of the most famous moments in internet history happened. A message was sent from a computer at UCLA to another computer at Stanford Research Institute. The word they tried to send was simple: login. But the system crashed after only 2 letters. So one of the earliest messages sent across the network that would help lead to the internet was not a grand announcement. It was not a complete word. It was just LO. That tiny failure is what makes the moment memorable. The internet would later carry emails, websites, search results, video calls, live streams, and billions of messages every day. But one of its first steps was a broken attempt to type a 5-letter command. It was not polished. It was a machine trying, failing, and still proving something enormous. ARPANET showed that computers in different places could connect. But connecting a few machines was not the same as connecting the world. Different networks, different languages. As computer networking grew, a new problem appeared. Different systems emerged in different places. Universities had their own setups. Research centers had their own machines. Government projects had their own methods. These networks did not always use the same equipment, rules, or way of moving information. It was no longer just, can two computers connect? It became, can different networks understand each other? Imagine several cities, each with its own roads, signs, rules, and maps. Inside each city, everything might work. But to connect them into one large transportation system, you would need a common way to identify destinations, move between roads, and follow the same rules. Without it, each network could be useful but separate. They could grow, but they could not truly become one larger system. The solution came from two names that would become central to Internet history: Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn. TCP/IP, the rules that let the Internet work. Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn helped develop the system that allowed different networks to communicate. It was called TCP/IP, short for Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol. When you send something across the Internet, the data does not have to travel as one complete piece. It can be broken into smaller packets, each carrying information and details about where it should go. Those packets can take different routes. If one path is busy or unavailable, the information can still move another way. When the packets arrive, TCP helps check and reassemble them, while IP helps with addressing, so the message, file, image, or video makes sense again. This mattered because it allowed different networks to join without becoming identical. They did not all have to use the same machines, belong to the same organization, or exist in the same country. As long as they followed the same rules, they could become part of something larger. The Internet was not one giant machine. It was a shared agreement. Once that agreement existed, the Internet could stop being a small experiment and start becoming something much bigger. From research tool to network of networks. Through the 1970s and 1980s, more universities, research centers, and government institutions began connecting their computers. But this was still a world for specialists. You did not sit at home, open a browser, and search for anything you wanted. There were no social media feeds, streaming videos, online shopping carts, or simple search bar waiting for a question. But underneath that roughness, something important was forming. Separate networks were joining into a larger structure. One system could connect to another, then another, then another. This is where the word Internet begins to make sense. It comes from the idea of interconnected networks. Networks linked together into something bigger than any one of them. The Internet was not a single network built from the ground up by one person, company, or office. It was a network of networks, made possible because many different parts could follow shared rules. Still, it belonged mostly to researchers, engineers, and institutions. For ordinary people, the real explosion was still ahead. When the Internet became visible. In the 1990s, the Internet began to change from something technical into something people could actually see, use, and imagine. Websites appeared. Email became more common. Search engines helped people find information without knowing exactly where it was stored. Companies realized this strange network was not just a research tool. It could become a marketplace, a library, a communication system, and eventually a new layer of everyday life. A place where ordinary users could read pages, send messages, discover information, and connect with people far away. By the early 2000s, it was becoming part of daily life, how people learned, worked, communicated, shopped, played, and understood the world. And that is what makes the Internet strange. It feels like one thing, but it was never built like one thing. Why no one person invented it? So who invented the Internet? The honest answer is, no one person did. That may feel unsatisfying because we like inventions to have a clear beginning, a name, a date, a single moment where everything changes. But the Internet did not appear that way. Some people developed the idea that communication should not depend on one fragile center. Some helped build ARPANET, Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn helped create TCP/IP, the shared rules that allowed different networks to speak to each other. Others built the standards, hardware, software, cables, servers, browsers, search tools, and services that turned it into something ordinary people could use. That is why Cerf and Kahn are often called fathers of the Internet. Their work was essential, but even they did not create the whole thing alone. The Internet was not invented like an object, it evolved like an ecosystem. A failed message that became a global system. So the next time you open a website, send a message, watch a video, or search for an answer, remember what is behind that simple action. You are using the result of decades of experiments, cooperation, mistakes, repairs, and ideas passed from one generation of engineers to another. The Internet began with computers that could not easily speak to each other. It was shaped by fears of fragile communication systems. It grew because researchers needed better ways to share information, and one of its earliest famous moments was not a perfect message, but a failed one. The word was supposed to be login. The system only sent LO from a message that did not even finish. The world eventually built a system we now use almost every day, often without thinking about it at all. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Secrets of Simple Things for more hidden histories behind the systems we use every day. And if there is a simple thing you want us to explore next, leave it in the comments.